Abi Own is the current spokesperson for hostages' families, and she's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining us on the show, Abi.
Thank you for having me.
Before I speak to you, let me tell our viewers about Abi. She is an American who's been living in Israel for 8 years. 5 of her family members, aged 12 to 80, were kidnapped by Hamas. Unfortunately, Abi lost 2 of her family members. First of all, our condolences to you. How are you coping up this far, Abi?
It feels like one long day of a nightmare so far. I don't know the day or the date. There's not much eating and sleeping. It's just fighting to make sure we bring home every single hostage.
Abi, how do you feel about the extension of the truce? And are there any signs of your family being part of the list of persons to be released?
We actually saw 2 of the children released 2 nights ago. So Erez and Sahar, aged 12 and 16, were released on Monday evening, and they went directly to the hospital, to their mother and to their older brother and sister. And now we continue to fight for their father, Ofer, who is still there. And with regard to an extension, I am not a military or government official, but if a continued ceasefire brings home more hostages, then that would be my preference, because no innocent civilian deserves to be held in captivity.
Well said, Abi. Many are questioning the criteria of choosing what hostages will be released first. So far, it has been women, children, teenagers, and the elderly. What do you make of this criteria? Should it be there in the first place?
It's so hard when we, as families or as people who are trying to advocate on behalf of those being held, to say you should pay attention to a gender or an age or nationality or something like that. I think the one thing we could agree on was that babies and children have no part in war, and that all of them needed to be released first, because it was just critical to get them out of that horror. Beyond that, I think that majority of us all feel like humans are human, and we want our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and grandparents home. And every single release is critical for us. There's not one that's more important than the other.
Abi, before I continue, tell me a little bit more about your family who is being held in Gaza.
Right now it's Ofer. He is 53 years old. He is the father of 4 children, 2 of whom were held captive until 2 days ago. And he is a carpenter and a bike rider, and he lived on kibbutz Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutzim on the Gaza border in the southern part. So 100 of the 450 people were either murdered or taken hostage on October 7th. He's a funny guy. He's the kind of guy that's going to make the whole room laugh. He smiles from his eyes, and we will fight day in and day out until he's home and until every single one of them are home.
Right. There have been protests by the families of hostages. There have been confrontation between the families of the hostages and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. They have staged protests at his office. How would you gauge the Israeli war cabinet and the government of Israel approach and even response towards the release of hostages this far?
I don't think anyone is going to tell you that they did enough fast enough, because 50 days in is when we began seeing the first kind of big releases. That being said, Israel right now is facing 2 conflicting priorities. 1, the release of the hostages, and 2, the elimination of Hamas. And those don't necessarily align. And so you have your constituents, the citizens of Israel, pushing to bring our family members home. And you also have this massive threat that happened on October 7th that we need to respond to. And so that makes sense to me that the government didn't respond as quickly as they did. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's fair, but I understand the conflict.
Abi, finally, what's your message as the spokesperson for the families of the hostages to both Hamas and the international community?
On October 6th, there was a truce. On October 7th, Hamas broke that. Israel did not want to start or conduct a war. Our civilians were taken from their beds, from their homes, from a party. They were murdered. They were beheaded. They were tortured. And now they're being held against their will. And I want the world, whether it be a government or an aid organization, to think about if it was their parent or their child or their sibling, and demand that an international aid organization be let in to see them. They need medical care. We need signs of life. And more than that, we need each and every one of them home.
Abi Own, the spokesperson for the hostages' family, we hope for a swift and safe release of your family members and indeed all the hostages held by Hamas. Stay safe, and thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.